Well, kia ora. I grew up in a beautiful town 6 hours south of Auckland called Havelock North. And outside our kitchen window growing up, I could see this beautiful maunga called Tomato Peak. Nestled in Tomato Peak are these massive redwood trees. Now these trees are just 100 years old, but some of these redwood trees in California can have a lifespan of 2,500 years ago. Like this one here, known as the General Sherman, it's estimated to be 2,500 years old. It's 85 meters tall, the span of 8 meters in diameter. Some of these trees have been known to reach a height of 37-story skyscraper, or the equivalent of it. I mean, it's massive. And you would sit back and think, how in the world, a tree like this must have a massive root system. But the thing about redwoods is they have no taproot. And their roots are actually quite shallow, just 6 to 12 feet deep. So you kind of ask, well, how does something so massive survive the storms and the strong winds, because redwoods are renowned to withstand the things that come their way? And the answer's found in their root system. Yes, the roots are quite shallow, but redwoods have learned to intertwine their roots together with other redwoods. This is the way they're designed. Effectively, they're holding each other up. And the trees grow close together, drawing nutrients from the other redwoods around them. What a beautiful image to describe friendship and community. You see, redwoods aren't designed to grow by themselves. What gives these trees their massive strength is the support of other redwoods. They've learned to grow together. And this is what we read about in Ecclesiastes. You see, throughout this book, the quester, as we've come to call the author of this book, has emphasized that life isn't always clean and tidy. I mean, this pandemic has taught us that life is unpredictable, hasn't it? The quester is not satisfied with the pat answers and platitudes that have been given to him in his past. He's honest about what happens in real life. Remember the summary we saw right at the very beginning, when he says, I've seen it all. It's nothing but smoke and spitting into the wind. Life's a corkscrew that can't be straightened, a minus that won't add up. And if that's the case, we kind of sit back and we ask, well, how do we live in this world of such futility and such frustration? And the question's already told us that we need to adjust our expectations. We need to change our attitude. We need to embrace the joy in the simple things right in front of us. And today he talks about this idea of friendship. You see, if we're going to survive the things that life throws our way, the ill health, the disappointments, the pandemics, the terrors, the flooding, well, we need to ask, well, what is it that's going to help me stand? What is it that's going to help you stand? And chapter 4 of Ecclesiastes gives us this answer in 5 powerful words. 2 are better than 1. It's this picture of friendship. It's a picture of a life interweaving, interlocking your life with somebody else in order to help you stand when life gets difficult. And this verse is really a hinge verse contrasting 2 portraits of people who are alone versus somebody who is in friendship with somebody else. Now, as you can see, I've 3 frames here, and they're empty. They don't have any pictures to them. And the reason for that is because the quester in chapter 4 is going to fill in the pictures for us as we go. So portrait number 1 is a picture of the oppressed. So listen to what he says right here at the beginning of Ecclesiastes chapter 4. Again, I observed all the oppression that takes place under the sun. I saw the tears of the oppressed with no one to comfort them. The oppressors have great power and their victims are helpless. Can you mentally see the picture that the quester is painting here, describing this picture of a victim with tears streaming down his or her face, eyes just full of fear? But he says here that there's no one to help. There's no one to wipe away those tears. There's no one to relieve the anxiety, to comfort them in this moment of need. And the quester actually concludes, it would actually be better if somebody wasn't even born and just to be spared, not even seeing the oppression in the world, let alone experiencing the oppression that exists. And he's talking about something that happened 2,500, 3,000 years ago, but the same thing still happens today. That's picture number one. It's a picture of the oppressed. And then he comes to picture number 2. It's a picture of the workaholic. He says here, again, I saw something futile, or chabal. It's this word the questers use throughout the book to sum up how frail and futile life can be, the way it's like smoke that just dissipates through our fingers. So what's chabal? What's not living up to the hype that it promises? Well, he says, there was a man all alone. He had neither son nor brother. There was no end to his toil, and yet his eyes were not content with his wealth. Again, can you mentally fill in the picture that he's describing here? I mean, this guy is successful. He's wealth in everything he has, but very poor in relationships. I imagine he's got a beautiful table, but no one to sit with him and enjoy what's on his table. He can pay for the best adventures, but I mean, he's got no time to go on them. He's got no one to really go on them with. And we might ask, well, why is there no end to his toil? Why does he work so hard? And we hear the answer here. Because his eyes were not content with his wealth. In fact, just 4 verses earlier, the questers observed really the same thing. He said, I observed that most people are motivated to success because they envy their neighbors. But this too, he says, is futile. Chabal. It's like chasing the wind. I mean, if your goal is more doesn't have a finish line. More is something that just like dissipates through your fingers. More, you get more, and then you want more and more and more. And it's like trying to catch the wind. You can never quite do it. So why does this workaholic live this frantic, futile life? But this is the question the guy asks here in chapter 4. Then he asks himself, who am I working for? Why am I giving up so much pleasure now? This too is futile. Chabal. It's a miserable business. You know, sometimes we say things like, I'm working at these crazy hours for the sake of my family. But we already know this guy doesn't have any family around him, so that excuse doesn't stack up. And let's be honest, it's not really an honest reason why many of us are doing the workaholic life. I picture this workaholic getting home late. It's another, dinner on the run, TV on in front of him, eating by himself. Dinner's finished. He takes the rubbish out to the garage and he glances over. He sees his golf bag there and he says, man, when was the last time I ever played golf with friends that wasn't part of like a sales deal? And then he sees his jet ski and he's like, I can't remember the last time I used that. And those snow skis, I haven't even been out on. I've got all this stuff. I just don't have the time. I don't have the friends to enjoy this with. What's the point? Now remember, the quester is writing as if he was Solomon. And we know that Solomon was super wealthy. In fact, elsewhere in the Bible we read, each year Solomon received about 25 tons of gold. And this did not include the additional revenue he received from merchants and traders. This is just the gold. So 25 tons of gold every year. Well, how much is a ton of gold worth today, you might be saying? Because, it's been a while since you sold your ton of gold, right? It would be nice. So I asked Siri a little earlier how much that was worth, and she told me it's 81 million New Zealand dollars. Now, that's for 1 ton. It says Solomon had 25 tons each year, so 81 million times 25, Siri said is 2 billion and 25 million. So it says he got this every year. He reigns for 40 years. So Siri, multiply 2 billion and 25 million by 40.
2 billion and 20 times 5 million times 40 is 400000000 400000000.
It's like serious cash. I have no idea here how even to say that, but this guy's like a trillionaire. And this is the guy who's asking himself, what's the point? I've got all this wealth, I've got all this stuff, but I've got nobody to enjoy it with. And you might go, well, what could be better than trillions of dollars? Well, the quester says here, there is something better. He says 2 people are better than 1. There's something better, and this leads us to our third portrait. Portrait 3 is a portrait of friendship. So far, we've seen two pictures of relational poverty, whether it's a victim, the oppressed, or whether it's a workaholic. The thing that links these two pictures together is they're both alone. No one's there to support them and help them. No one's there to enjoy life with them. Versus this picture of friendship. This is what the quester says. Two people are better off than one, for they can help each other succeed. And then he goes on and he talks about various hazards that people faced back in his time and what it is that navigates and helps people get through these various hazards. So hazard number one, he says we fall into life's potholes. If one person falls, the other person can reach out for help. If someone who falls alone, they're in real trouble. Now remember, this is at a time when there's no vehicle. So if you wanted to get from point A to point B, you walked. And so if you're walking late at night and you might stumble. And if you're by yourself, you're in real trouble. But he says if you're with somebody else, well, you've got help. Help is right there available to you. You see, in this book, the quester's been telling us, life is uncertain. Sure, it might be going well at one moment, but you don't know the pothole that's right around the corner of your life. And at some point in your life, you are going to face plant in that pothole. And he says, when he observes the people that seem to do well versus the people that don't, it's the people who have friends in their life who are able to cope with the potholes around them. So the question is, who are you traveling with? If they took a fall, would you be there for them? And if you took a fall, would they be there for you? That's hazard number one. Hazard number two, we are frozen in the chilling seasons of life. He says here in verse 11, likewise, two people lying close together can keep each other warm. But how can one be warm alone? At this point, you might be out in a desert, you've got no sleeping bag, you've got no tent, and the way you survived is by sharing body heat with another. It was the normal thing to do at that time. And the quester says, the people who are able to survive those changing seasons like we looked at last week, when it gets chilly, the people who survive are the people who are in friendship with other people, not the people who are alone. So the question is, are you there for people who are going through a changing season? Do you have people in your life who are there for you when seasons in your life change? And then he looks at another hazard. We're vulnerable by ourselves. A person standing alone can be attacked and defeated, but two can stand back to back and conquer. If you're out walking from point A to point B, you stand a greater risk of getting attacked when you're by yourself versus whether you're with somebody else. And again, the quester observes that the people who do life well amidst all the futility and the fragile nature of life, well, they don't travel alone, they travel together. Now, the thing about life is there are hazards all around us. And the hazards that the quester has mentioned, that the thing that links them all is you don't know when these things are coming. You can't always see the pothole that's around the corner. You can't always anticipate the changing seasons. You don't know the danger that's lurking in the shadows. And the quester can keep talking about how fragile our lives are, that the health challenges, the broken engagement. Child number one was really hard, and then child number two came along and was like, whoa, this is really hard. There's job loss, there's lockdowns, pandemics. How will my business survive? A whole lot of questions we're asking. And as he looks at the people who survive and thrive versus the people who do well, it's friends who get people through. His summary again, two people are better than one. And then he says, three are even better, for a triple braided cord is not easily broken. Now, I love the picture that he brings in here, that this picture of a rope. Now, this rope here has various strands. If you start undoing the rope here, it has these three here, but actually each of these strands has more strands here too, and you kind of just keep going, and all of these are there. All these things tie together, they're woven together. Now, any one by themselves is actually quite fragile. You can kind of break these. But when they start to be woven together, and then woven together, this becomes really strong. And this is what the quester is saying. When we're in community with others, we are strong like rope. He's seeking to move us from me to we in order to survive and thrive. To put it another way, alone I am string, together we are rope. I like the picture he has. See, when we get slammed by any aspect of life, the reason we're able to survive, even thrive in it, is because we're weaved together in friendship. Now, Maori have this beautiful Whakataukī to describe this. Whakapūpūtia mai o mānuka ki koreai I whati, meaning cluster the branches of the mānuka so they will not break. You see, a branch by itself is pretty strong, but can still snap. It's when you cluster these together, they're super strong. By itself, it's a breakable twig. Together, we're not going to break. Very, very hard to break a whole branch, massively twined together. Now, if you're familiar with the story of the Bible, you might think of strong leaders like the Apostle Paul. And it's easy to think of the Apostle Paul as like this strong individual redwood out in the forest by himself. But that would actually be a mistake, because Paul had all these friends that he had interwoven the foundations of his life with. In fact, in one of his letters we know as 2 Timothy, is towards the end of his life, he calls on his friends for help. At the time, Paul was in a prison in Rome. I actually went to that prison a couple of years ago, and it was the remains of that prison. It's a dark, cold dungeon. And I can imagine Paul there. He's feeling alone. He's feeling vulnerable. And rather than just trying to pretend that he's strong, he writes a letter to his friends, asking for help, asking that they come visit him, asking that they pray for him. You see, some of you might think, well, I don't actually need anybody. I don't really need friends. And perhaps you're the type of person who's first in line to give a helping hand to someone else in need. But maybe you find it hard to actually receive help. You don't want to place burdens onto other people. Or at least that's what you tell yourself. Perhaps it's actually you don't want to look like you're weak. You might be willing to pray for others, but when somebody asks you, how can we pray for you? You're like, oh, I don't need prayer for anything. And in your mind, it's like prayer is almost a sign of weakness. But when did prayer become a sign of weakness? You see, that's what I love about the Apostle Paul. He's this strong, effective leader, but he knows that he needs friends to cheer him on. He needs friends around him to pray for him. And he's not afraid to ask for help and express his vulnerabilities to them. This week I let people know about some needs that I have in my life. I've been experiencing this ongoing back pain now for like 7 months, and it's got worse in lockdown. And I've also been waking up at night with, I guess, just some anxiety that's been kind of weighing on me, and something I face from time to time. And so I took my cues here from the Apostle Paul, asking friends to pray for him. You see, healthy people say things like, I need you. Can you pray for me? Can you help me? Because this is what I'm feeling right now. See, Paul was no massive redwood. Without the massive support of his friends around him, he had interwoven the foundations of his life with these friends. By himself, he was just a thread of string. With others, he was a strong rope. So what does it look like to adjust the way we live so that our lives would be more described as rope rather than string? Well, the first thing is to realize the value of having friends in your life. You see, what the quester is observing is what many people have observed about our society. Do you realize, for instance, that loneliness is described as the fastest growing public health crisis? And that's the conclusion of the ex-general surgeon of the USA. Listen to what he wrote in the Harvard Business Review. During my years caring for patients, the most common pathology I saw was not heart disease or diabetes, it was loneliness. And he explains, The elderly man who came to our hospital every few weeks seeking relief from chronic pain was also looking for human connection. He was lonely. The middle-aged woman battling advanced HIV who had no one to call to inform that she was sick, she was lonely too. I found that loneliness was often in the background of clinical illness, contributing to disease, making it harder for patients to cope and to heal. He goes on and says loneliness is associated with a greater risk of cardiovascular disease, dementia, depression, and anxiety. Along the same lines, a groundbreaking study from Brigham Young University conducted it found that weak social connections can shorten a person's life by, get this, 15 years. I mean, that's roughly the same impact as smoking 15 cigarettes a day, which I also don't recommend. You see, Solomon said, a sweet friendship refreshes the soul. We all like this idea of friendship. But how many of us can actually say, yeah, I have those friends in my life. I have 2, 3, 4 people that I can count on. You know, one of the hang-ups that we all have is that we've had people let us down. We've had friends and they haven't been loyal to us. And we find it hard now we just find it hard to trust anybody. And I find it interesting that Solomon, who spoke so well about friendship, also says this. Many will say they are loyal friends, but who can find one who's truly reliable? See, we've all experienced the breakdown of relationships. But what many of us do because of that is we make the whole world pay for one person's mistake. And we stay isolated because of that experience of that person who let us down, that person who hurt us. But please don't allow that experience to stop you from experiencing healthy friendship. See, the first thing to realize is the value of having friends. The second thing is to reflect on the traits of a good friend. A question I want to invite you to answer this week is, what are the qualities that make a good friend? I discuss it in your bubble and groups this week. In fact, why not share your thoughts right now in the host chat? My guess is it's going to include traits like honesty and reliability, someone who has my back, someone who I enjoy hanging out with, someone who makes time for me. What are some of the ones that you have? I mean, share some of them now. And after you reflect on the traits of a good friend, I guess the third thing is, well, be a good friend. You know, rather than focus all that energy into thinking, well, there's no trustworthy people out there, there's no friends out there, perhaps put that energy more into asking this question. Am I a good friend? Where can I grow in these traits in order to be a good friend to somebody else? You know, our first instinct when we think about friendship is we go, well, you know, where do I get friends? I can't go to Amazon to buy them. I can't go to some shopping mall and they're closed anyway. I mean, where do I go? And it's hard to make friends in your 40s. It's hard to make friends when you're at high school. It's hard to make friends when you're retired. I mean, getting friends, let's face it, it's just hard at times. But we all have people in our lives somewhere. It might be on social media. It might be a neighbor. It might be a colleague. It might be a fellow student, a person at the gym, somebody else at church. So what does it look like to be more intentional with the friends that you already have or the network of people around you? I mean, can people count on you? Can your family, your spouse, your colleagues, can they count on you to be there for them when they need some help? Solomon wrote in Proverbs, a friend loves at all times and a brother is born for adversity. See, what if you were born to help others in their time of adversity and the hazards that they're experiencing even right now in the pandemic? A final way to respond is to grab the opportunities to better connect. You know, one of the challenges of a church our size is that we can't know everybody. We can't celebrate every birthday or anniversary or know everybody's names. And what's more, we're like scattered all over the place. It's a logistical challenge. And that's why we have small groups that we call connect groups. And in a connect group, we bring people together in a way where people can know each other's names. They can experience friendships. And for a particular season of time that they're committed to, they join with, 10 or 12 other people in one of these connect groups. Now, right now, we can't be meeting on site together, but we're still able to do that like we're doing right now, digitally. So over these next 3 weeks, we want to provide an opportunity for you to do that. We have some online pop-up groups that serve as a taster of Connect groups. This is a great way to meet other people and connect together. So for these next 3 weeks, we want to give the opportunity to meet in a Zoom call, to just respond to some of the questions about this week. It'd be friendship that we're talking about today. And you don't even have to be in Auckland to be part of one of these. Marg, who was hosting the service earlier, is going to facilitate one of these pop-up groups on Tuesday evening. And John Theakston, our discipleship pastor, will host one Wednesday lunchtime from noon to 1. And there's a form in the host comments right now where you can fill that in just to express your interest. There's some details also over on Facebook. See, the Questa would say to us, remember, life is hard. I know life is hard. So please don't navigate through this futile life alone. Instead, do whatever you need to do to turn the superficial relationships you already have into deeper relationships. And if that means even pulling back on some work involvement and other things that you're doing in order to deepen friendships, go for it. Renew your resolve to be a better friend to people around you. Whakapūpūtia mai o mānuka kia kore ai I whati. Cluster the branches of the mānuka so they will not break. Move from me to we in order to survive and even thrive. Because remember, alone I am like string. Together we are rope. Let's pray together. And so Jesus, we thank you for what you teach us about friendship. I love the way, Jesus, you even gathered people around your own life because you knew that you needed people around you. And help us to follow in your footsteps, to have friends in our lives, to be vulnerable to our needs, and to support other people going through a tough time too. In Jesus' name.
You are faithful, God, so good to us. Come on, we'll sing.
God of Abraham, you're the God of covenant and faithful promises. Time and time again, you have proven you do just what you said. Though the storms may come and the winds may blow, I'll remain steadfast and let my heart learn when you speak a word, it will come to pass. Great is your faithfulness to me. Great is your faithfulness to me. From the rising sun to the setting sun, I will praise your name. Great is your faithfulness to me.
Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Lord.
God, from age to age, though the earth may pass away, your word remains the same. Your history can prove there's nothing you can do. You're faithful and true. Though the storms may come and the winds may blow, I'll remain steadfast and let my heart learn when you speak a word, it will come to pass. Great is your faithfulness to me. Great is your faithfulness to me. From the rising sun to the setting Great
no
is
one
your
like you,
name.
God. In every
You're so
season,
good to us,
in every season,
Jesus.
you're our anchor, you're our
We
foundation.
exalt your name.
We can trust you, God. Hold firm to you.